Rockin' Royal, rockin' Navy, know y'all with me, let's get it, baby, Rockin' Royal, rockin' Navy.
Welcome back to another episode of the Rockin' Royal Soccer Show. We're getting consistent on this one finally. Finally getting into a little rhythm, finally getting into a little flow, just in time for the end of the regular season. Congratulations. Sean Walker from KSL.com here, as always, joined by my inestimable co-host, Carla Swensen-Haslem. You know her from ESPN Plus, calling all those BYU women's soccer games, former BYU women's soccer player, does a little bit of BYU TV work on the side, as well as some occasional lawyering, my sources indicate to me, every now and then. But that mostly involves reading and writing a whole bunch of legal briefs, and we're not going to get into any of that, Carla, because this was a crazy week and one that I'm not going to lie, I didn't see coming necessarily. I think there were people that agreed they didn't see this coming, but you had the foresight to look into your crystal ball, to go full Raven Simone. That's so Carla coming out. You saw the future. You saw BYU 2, number 14 Texas Tech 1 in the final game of the regular season. So I just want to give you an opportunity to take a victory lap. Carla Swensen-Haslem, folks.
Thank you. It's all gut feeling. I trusted my gut. And I knew this BYU team was going to go into Lubbock and do something really, really big. You could just feel it, And it was probably the biggest game that BYU has had this year. They've played a lot of talented teams this year, had some hard knocks, had some good wins. But that win in Lubbock, I think, was a big statement piece and the biggest win this season for BYU.
Yeah, biggest one of the season so far. Number 14 in the country, 2 top 40 RPI teams. I think this is the type of win that gets BYU, as odd as it is to say, Carla, because I don't know if this team looked like an NCAA tournament team during points of the regular season, certainly not a non-conference play. But I think this team is punching its ticket as an at-large contestant in the NCAA tournament, almost regardless of what happens in Kansas City this weekend. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But first, I want to rewind to that game itself in Lubbock. BYU falls behind 1-0 at halftime. They've done this before. But 1-0, certainly not insurmountable. They've come back from deficits. This was no different. First from MacKenzee Vance with just an absolutely exquisite free kick in about midway through the second half. And then the stars of the second half of BYU season, yeah, I'm going to say it, connected in the final minute, about 35 seconds to go. Freshman Lucy Kessler lines up another left-footed laser that ricochets off of Avery Frischknecht's head for her 4th goal of the season, all on headers, or at least 3 of them on headers and 1 of them off of her belly button area that she'll claim as a header, but we all know wasn't actually a header. Sorry, Avery. But either way, this one counts. Probably the biggest goal of BYU season. Clinches a top 4 bid in the Big 12 tournament this weekend. They will go straight to the quarterfinals. And also probably puts BYU in the NCAA tournament as an at-large contender. I think a lot has to go wrong right now, frankly, Carla, in order for them not to be in that field come Selection Monday.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think BYU has a lot of things playing to their advantage. The first is that win that you just mentioned against Texas Tech, because Texas Tech was ranked so high, one of the favorites. Has a bye in the conference play, and because their RPI was so high going into this game, I think it is going to give BYU an at-large bid, regardless of what happens in Kansas City. So that I think helps. I think it also plays to BYU's advantage that they're BYU. I said it, but I think having such a legacied program, I think really helps them, even though this would technically be considered a building year or perhaps maybe one of their weaker years. And the reason I say that, Sean, is because I look at the beginning of the season, how the coaches poll ranked them at number 3 in the country when it was clearly a building year. ranked them at number 3 in the country, even though they had lost almost their entire starting lineup. And that just shows that the amount of respect that so many of these coaching polls and NCAA polls have for BYU, again, even when it's a building year. So I think that alongside this big win really helps BYU. I think they're peaking at the right time. They're having some big wins. And then obviously, depending on how the conference tournament goes, will determine seeding or bids. But I do think that they are a contender for an at-large bid. I don't think it'll be at home. I think BYU would have to win the conference tournament to have an at-home bid. So for all the fans in Provo, I'm so sorry. You probably will not have another game at South Field, unless BYU wins the tournament. Unless they come in and just smack down TCU, that'll be a tough one. There may be another Texas Tech rematch. You never know. But unless that happens, I don't think BYU will play at home. Now, they may still play in Utah, though, depending on how UVU and Utah State end things, because they've both had stellar seasons as well.
Yeah, the NCAA does like to award regional first-round matchups. They've done that for several years, and I won't lie, Carla, I hate it. I can't stand it. I think it cheapens the NCAA tournament when you're basing even a single round off of anything other than overall quality of play and the regular season and that kind of thing. And in this case, I think it really cheapens it because all three of those teams, Utah State, Utah Valley, and BYU, they've played each other already. BYU and UVU was in an exhibition game, but they have all played each other. So you've seen that matchup, and I think it's unfair for any of those teams to have to play one another. But I think you're right. I think there's a decent chance that two of those three get paired up, assuming they're all in the NCAA tournament field. And right now, I think two of those three are in pretty solid at-large contention. BYU moves up to number 34 in the RPI, which the selection committee loves to base their rankings on. That's actually just 3 spots ahead of Texas Tech, which dropped to 37 with the loss. So BYU's has the third best RPI in the Big 12 behind West Virginia and, of course, TCU, a top 15 team right now. BYU's just behind Utah State. They're Mountain West regular season champions, number 29 in the RPI. It's probably not fair to say they have to win the conference tournament in order to clinch passage to the NCAA tournament, but they might because mid-majors are unfortunately judged a little bit differently. I don't think they do. I think they're in no matter what. They certainly should be in no matter what based off of all the metrics, their record, their strong home record, the way they've been getting better. They had a little bit of a slump to start Mountain West play, but I think they've come out of that and they're getting better there. So I think they should be in. UVU, I think, actually has a little bit of work to do. They're number 59 right now in the RPI. You really want to get into that top 45, top 50 range in order to really feel pretty good about your selection standing. They might need to win the WAC conference in Abilene, Texas next week. Win the WAC tournament, in order to truly get in. They have been left out as WAC regular season champions without winning the tournament before. So probably need to take care of business there. Either way, if all three of them are in, if that happens, I think two of the three, there's a very good chance two of the three are playing each other in that first round. And since Utah State played both of these teams, they were at BYU and at UVU in the regular season, I think the most likely scenario then is BYU and Utah Valley, and where that game is played, I don't entirely know. Obviously, Clyde Field is under a whole bunch of stadium reconstruction. That game that they did play, it was an exhibition game, so it doesn't technically count in the standings. But I know there are some broadcast complications that might potentially move that game back to South Field. I don't want to speculate too much on that because we'll talk about that all in about a week or so, leading up to Selection Monday, I think. But all of that to say, BYU's win over Texas Tech probably, I'll give it a strong probably, clinched a spot in the NCAA tournament field. And it definitely, Carla, clinched a spot as in the number 4 seed in the 2024 Sprouts Farmer Market Big 12 Soccer Championship. Yes, I gave the corporate sponsors sponsoring. You only get one, Sprouts. Otherwise, you got to come sponsor us. Give us a call. We can make that happen. Certainly. So number 4, BYU will host the winner of Oklahoma State and Cincinnati. That's the 5 seed and the 12 seed this Saturday, November 2nd at CPKC Stadium in Kansas City, Missouri. That's the home of the NWSL's Kansas City Current. You can catch that at 10:30 a.m. Mountain Time on ESPN Plus, 11:30 a.m. local time, Central Time in Kansas City. The winner of that will get the winner of top-seeded TCU, Utah, or Colorado, depending on how that first round game goes as well in the semifinals. BYU probably doesn't need to make a huge run in this Big 12 tournament in order to clinch an NCAA berth. We've talked about that plenty, Carla. But what do they need to do out of this next week, little over a week, 8 days, I guess, in Kansas City to really feel good about the postseason, do you think?
Yeah, well, I think they should very much take advantage of the fact that they have a bye. Statistically, like if we're just looking at numbers, statistically, the teams that have buys going into conference tournaments, not just in the Big 12, but in some of the other big soccer tournaments, statistically, those are the teams that always end up in the finals. And you would say, well, yeah, that's because they're the best team. But I also think it's because they've just played one less game. And I think BYU needs to take advantage of that. The fact that they will have played one less game, they're going to be fresh. They have to mentally stay in it. But why not run these teams into the ground? If they have already been coming off of a game, why not really try to take advantage of that and force teams to have to make substitutes, force teams to have to chase the ball, and really try to wear out some of these players? I think that, and that's going to be more in the semifinals, not as much in the quarters because I think teams will still be pretty fresh. This is Division I soccer. Teams will be able to recover after one game. But are they going to be able to recover after two games when BYU's only played one, right? And that's assuming they win in the quarters. But you see the point that I'm making is I think BYU should use the fact that they have a bye as part of their strategy and really focus on possessing the ball, playing defeat, and so you're forcing your opponent to chase. I think that's going to be really key. And then you have some of your more obvious, you want to score a lot of goals. BYU does give up goals. That's a reality of this season. They do give up at least a goal a game, if not more. And so BYU just has to try to outscore their opponents. And that's going to come from a variety of players and a variety of positions. But I think if BYU can make their opponents chase, take advantage of the bye, and then just outscore their opponents, they're going to be a very competitive team in this conference tournament.
Yeah, very competitive indeed. I think I like TCU and West Virginia in that final, but if BYU's in the semifinal and a good show against TCU, then I think anything can happen. TCU's been running roughshod through this conference for the most part. They obviously beat BYU 4-1, I think was the final in Fort Worth. I think a game there in the conference tournament semifinals on a neutral site with potentially a pretty fiery home-ish crowd for the Cougs. We have seen BYU fans travel to Kansas City pretty well. I think that could lift them to at least a tight contest, a much better contest in BYU's favor than certainly that 4-1 game, which probably got a little bit out of hand later than it actually was. I'm not saying TCU didn't deserve to win in any ways. I don't know if it was a 4-1 type game until obviously there were a couple of penalty kicks and kind of the wheels sort of started coming off in a lot of ways. TCU is still very good. I'm not knocking TCU.
Yeah.
Very good team. They won the conference for a reason.
Yeah, and I think they'll win the tournament, the conference tournament.
Yeah, and I think they should be favorites. They should absolutely be favorites to win the Big 12 women's soccer tournament. In fact, I believe Chris Henderson over at All White Kit, I believe he has handicapped TCU as the favorite. Yeah, with the +8 expected goal differential, he's got them currently favored to win the conference tournament over there. So it would be an upset if anybody but TCU won it. I think BYU should probably be listed among those first-rate contenders for that upset, though. 100%.
Yeah, no, I think so too. I think BYU, if BYU makes it to the semis or even to the finals, but if BYU has a good showing in the semis, I think they're in a really good place postseason.
Yeah, absolutely. What we had? Some Big 12 awards came out. Should we mention some of those?
Let's do it.
5 BYU women's soccer players earned all Big 12 honors this week. That's led by a pair of all Big 12 first team selections. Avery Frischknecht, the starting center back who played a team high 1,620 minutes scored 4 goals on the year, including that winner against Texas Tech that we talked about. And then Allie Fryer, the Cougs' leading scorer, with 9 goals on 63 shots, as well as 2 assists in just over 1,200 minutes this year. That's back-to-back All Big 12 honors for Friars. She was an All Big 12 second-team selection last year, now moves up to first team this year. MacKenzee Vance and Micah Kromenhoek earned All Big 12 second-team selections, and then Lucy Kessler and Kromenhoek also were named to the Big 12 All Freshman team as well. If you're wondering, forward of the year went to TCU's Bella Diorio, very well deserved. Midfielder of the year, TCU's Ollie Pena. If you're seeing a trend there, there's probably a reason. Again, the Horned Frogs won the regular season; they're very good. Texas Tech's Macy Blackburn won Defender of the Year. Colorado's Jordan Knights was named Goalkeeper of the Year. ASU's Kira Blundell, Freshman of the Year. And then Eric Bell from TCU finally deservedly wins Conference Coach of the Year. Not only for what he was able to do with TCU this year, but I think the Frogs have been building very well for the past couple of seasons. So a little bit of a kind of a mini lifetime achievement award in there as well. This TCU team is really good, but we'll throw a full list out there on our social channels. You can follow us on Instagram at Rock and Royal Pod as well. We'll put something together for some of those players. Shout out also to Draper's own Seven Castaigne, former Waterford star, all Big 12 first team player as well. And a couple of Utah players on there that BYU fans probably don't want to know about. A couple other local players as well. But yeah, did anything surprise you or what name, which BYU name on this list, I guess, were you most impressed with when it came to some of these all Big 12 selections by the conference coaches?
Yeah, I think they were well deserved. I've been especially impressed this year in the midfield with Kromenhoek and with Kessler. And so to me, it was no surprise that they got those awards both as the freshman team and then on the second all conference team, because I just felt like they were so steady all year and very reliable. And that's what you need if you want to get postseason awards, is just to be consistent. And that's exactly what they did. I thought they helped the team a lot. They really grew with the team as the team progressed. I was a little disappointed that Presley Freeman didn't receive the same sort of recognition, because I think Presley Freeman is going to be a star on this BYU team. She is so good and so solid. And I can honestly say I've never seen a freshman who plays so confidently and so experienced as she does. I can honestly say I've never seen a freshman who just has the same sort of just confidence. So I was a bit, I felt personally a bit snubbed that Presley Freeman didn't get some of that recognition, but I'm not worried. I feel like it'll come in the future for her. So, like I said, very deserving of the girls who got it. And I have no doubt that you'll continue to see these names in years to come.
7 all Big 12 defenders on that first team, including Frischknecht, but a couple of outside backs in there as well. And then 6 all Big 12 second team defenders as well. I do wonder if Presley didn't get squeezed out simply because of her positioning, because I agree with you, Carla. She's been one of the better outside backs in this league. And the fact that she's only a freshman, I think should be really, really exciting for BYU soccer fans for years and years to come. She's been very quietly, maybe like a top 3 or 4 player on this BYU team, just with her energy, with her ability to get forward, the way she tracks back as well. She doesn't lose sight of her defensive principles while getting forward. And just she opens up her teammates so much with what she's able to do that you almost forget that she's a freshman. I agree with you, though, about Micah Kromenhoek. She's been very quietly maybe BYU's best player this year. I know Allie Fryer obviously gets a lot of merit for good reasons. I know Avery Frischknecht, I think, is right up there with the best of them. The way she stepped in to that starting center back role and really nailed it down is incredibly impressive. But when Micah Kromenhoek came into her own, and this BYU midfield in particular started to come into its own, a brand new midfield, I think that's when BYU really started to see success, both offensively and defensively, in connecting the two sides, in setting up their forwards. Allie Fryer got a lot better because of it. And I know Kromenhoek only technically finished with 3 assists on the year, but if this were hockey, she probably would have had another like 4 or 5 hockey assists, second assists, the pass before the pass. if you will. She's been
Yeah.
really good in possession. She's played a number of positions in that midfield. She started out playing a little bit of the 6, and then Lucy Kessler came into her own at that 6, so they pushed her to an advanced role for the first time in her soccer career, by the way. And I thought she handled it very well. And her partnership with MacKenzee Vance, I think, is only starting to bloom. I think those two could be really good next year as well on this BYU team. So a lot of well-deserved honors. I'll agree with you with Presley in there. I also thought that Presley Freeman probably should have earned a spot somewhere on here, maybe like an all-freshman nod. I think an all-freshman nod was probably would have been fitting for her. Again, numbers might have played into it. BYU had 2 selections. I don't think any other team had more than 2 on that all-freshman team. Yeah, TCU also had 2 selections, so maybe numbers played into it there. But yeah, I think there's a lot of promise on this BYU team and a lot of really good things to come and a lot of really good things to come on the season. Once again, the season's not over. BYU will open the Big 12 Women's Soccer Championships this Saturday in the quarterfinals. That's November 2nd, 10:30 a.m. Mountain Time on ESPN Plus against the winner of Oklahoma State and Cincinnati as of the time of recording here. Semifinals are next Wednesday, November 6th, followed by the championship match Saturday, November 9th at 7 p.m. local time. That's 6 p.m. Mountain. All games streamed live on ESPN Plus, which is also the part-time home of my esteemed co-host of this podcast, Carla Swensen-Haslem. Carla, as we put a bow finally officially on the regular season, just anything else you want to mention, anything else you want to kind of shout out and give a nod to before we reconvene following the first 2 games, I guess, technically, of the Big 12 championships?
Yeah, I think the last thing I just want to add is, I think about the progress this BYU team has made. I think about our first few episodes, Sean, where you and I had a lot of questions and a lot of doubts. And maybe doubts is too strong of a word, but this was such a young team. They weren't scoring a lot of goals. They were losing to teams that they've never lost to before or that they should be beating. And I think there was quite a bit of doubt in the Cougar fan community. And I would still call this a building year. However, this BYU team has really found themselves. And I think that's perhaps the most impressive, more than the awards and the honors and the wins, although you take those, as many as you can get. I think the most impressive thing is this is a team that had so many doubts and questions at the beginning of the year, didn't even know their starting lineup going into regular conference play, and yet has really started to find themselves. They're still a very young team. They still make mistakes, but I think it's a team that is worthy of going to the NCAA tournament now. And that's just so impressive considering that at the beginning of the season, they were not an NCAA tournament team at all. So the fact that they've been able to find that, over the course of 2 months is something that I think really should be applauded.
Yeah, absolutely. We always knew this was a young team. Again, this team probably didn't look like an NCAA tournament team at a lot of times. I think they are now. We'll see what their seeding is. We'll see if there's any possibility of a home game in that first round. I think it's still out there. I don't think the door's completely shut on there. But I also think a lot needs to happen, beginning with taking care of business, some form of business in Kansas City, winning at least a game. I think winning 2 games actually may be able to push them over the line. This TCU team is really good, and I think a win over the top team in the conference could go a long way towards securing BYU. They're playing some of their best soccer right now at the end of the year, and that's what you want to do. You want to be peaking at the right time. You especially want to be peaking at the end of a season on a team with so many freshmen and sophomore like these Cougars have. It's been a lot of fun, especially over the last, I think, month plus of this season, and it is certainly not over yet. So we will be there the entire way. We've been there all season. Once again, thanks to my co-host Carla Swensen-Haslem, former BYU women's soccer star, current ESPN Plus analyst, for keeping me on track this year. And signing off until we get into Big 12 Soccer Championship play. I'm Sean Walker from KSL.com saying so long, and thanks for all the fish.
Man, them Utah State Aggies, man, they just some pets. Catch us out in Vegas, you could place your bet. Coach G up on our side, so we never pressed. Praying meetings every day, so we never stress. Rock and baby. Rockin' Royal, rockin' Navy. Know you with me. Let's get it, baby.